Welcome, dear listeners, to History with Herodotus, where we embark on a journey through the annals of time, uncovering the secrets of the past and illuminating the present. Today, we find ourselves at the threshold of a pivotal moment in modern history, as we delve into the origins of the Crimean War, a conflict that would shake the foundations of European politics and forever alter the balance of power on the continent. As we set the stage for this epic struggle, let us first consider the complex web of alliances and rivalries that characterized the mid-19th century. The great powers of Europe, Britain, France, Russia, Austria, and Prussia, were engaged in a delicate dance of diplomacy and strategy, each seeking to advance their own interests while containing the ambitions of their rivals. It was within this treacherous landscape that the seeds of the Crimean War were sown. In the early 1850s, tensions began to rise between Russia and the Ottoman Empire as the Russians sought to expand their influence in the Balkans and gain control of the strategic waterways that connected the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. The British, who had long been concerned about Russian expansion, viewed these moves with growing unease, fearing that if Russia were to gain dominance over the Dardanelles, it would give them significant leverage over European commerce. One of the key figures in this drama was Tsar Nicholas I of Russia, a strong-willed and ambitious leader who was determined to assert his country's interests in the region. In 1852, Nicholas began to exert pressure on the Ottoman Empire, seeking to gain control of the holy sites in Jerusalem and to protect the rights of Orthodox Christians in the region. The British and French, however, viewed these moves as a thinly veiled attempt by Russia to expand its influence at the expense of the Ottomans. As the situation continued to deteriorate, the great powers of Europe found themselves drawn into a complex series of diplomatic crises and misunderstandings. In 1853, the Russian government occupied the Danubian principalities, which were under Ottoman control, citing the need to protect the rights of Orthodox Christians in the region. The British and French, who had long been committed to maintaining the integrity of the Ottoman Empire, viewed this move as a direct challenge to their own interests and began to mobilize their forces. The stage was now set for the outbreak of war. In September 1853, the Russian Black Sea fleet sailed into the harbor of Sinop on the northern coast of Turkey and destroyed a Turkish fleet that was anchored there. This provocative act sparked outrage in Britain and France, and both countries began to prepare for war. As we explore the earliest history of the Crimean War, it becomes clear that this conflict was not simply a clash of arms between rival powers, but rather a complex struggle for influence and dominance in a region of vital strategic importance. From the sun-drenched hills of the Crimean Peninsula to the misty corridors of power in London, Paris, and Saint-Saëns. And so, having set the stage for this epic struggle, we shall now proceed to explore the primary events of the Crimean War, including the Battle of Alma, the Siege of Sevastopol, and the Charge of the Light Brigade as the great powers of Europe clash in a maelstrom of bloodshed and heroism. Join me next time on History with Herodotus as we delve deeper into the tumultuous years that would shape the course of modern history. Welcome back to History with Herodotus as we continue our journey through the tumultuous years of the Crimean War. We now find ourselves at the height of this epic struggle, where the great powers of Europe are engaged in a maelstrom of bloodshed and heroism. As the war raged on, the British and French armies landed on the Crimean Peninsula with the objective of capturing the strategic port city of Sevastopol. The Russians, however, were determined to defend their territory, and the stage was set for one of the most brutal and devastating sieges in modern history. The Siege of Sevastopol, which lasted for 11 months, would test the mettle of both armies as they clashed in a series of bloody battles, including the Battle of Alma, the Battle of Balaclava, and the Battle of Inkerman. One of the most infamous events of the war was the Charge of the Light Brigade, where a British cavalry unit consisting of 600 men charged into the face of withering Russian artillery fire. This heroic but ill-fated charge, which was immortalized in a poem by Alfred, Lord Tennyson, would become a symbol of the bravery and sacrifice of the British soldiers during the war. As the siege dragged on, the Russians continued to fortify their defenses, while the British and French armies struggled to maintain their supply lines and morale. The war was taking a devastating toll on both sides, with thousands of soldiers dying from wounds, disease, and exposure. Despite these challenges, the British and French commanders, including Lord Raglan and Marshal Canrobert, remained resolute in their determination to capture Sevastopol and defeat the Russian army. The city of Sevastopol itself was a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of the Russian defenders. The Russians had built an elaborate system of fortifications, including trenches, redoubts, and artillery emplacements, which made it nearly impossible for the British and French armies to breach the city's defenses. The Russians also employed innovative tactics, such as mining and countermining, to disrupt the enemy's siege operations. As the war entered its final stages, the great powers of Europe began to realize the devastating consequences of their actions. The Crimean War had sparked a wider conflict, drawing in other nations and causing widespread destruction and chaos. As the historian Orlando Figes has noted, the Crimean War was the first modern war, the first war of the industrial age, and it set the pattern for all future wars. As we reflect on this pivotal moment in history, we are reminded of the words of Tsar Nicholas I, who once said, "The fate of empires is decided not by diplomacy, but by blood and iron." The Crimean War was a stark reminder of the brutal realities of war, where the clash of arms and the shedding of blood would ultimately determine the course of history. And so, having explored the primary events of the Crimean War, we shall now proceed to examine the decline and aftermath of this epic struggle. Join me next time on History with Herodotus as we delve into the final stages of the war, including the fall of Sevastopol, the Treaty of Paris, and the lasting legacy of the Crimean War on modern history. Welcome back to History with Herodotus. As we conclude our journey through the tumultuous years of the Crimean War, we now find ourselves in the aftermath of this epic struggle, where the great powers of Europe are grappling with the devastating consequences of their actions. The fall of Sevastopol in September 1855 marked a significant turning point in the war, as the Russian army was forced to abandon its strategic port city and retreat to the northern shores of the Black Sea. The British and French armies, exhausted and depleted by the long and brutal siege, began to prepare for a final push against the remaining Russian forces. The Treaty of Paris, signed on March 30, 1856, officially brought an end to the Crimean War. The treaty imposed severe penalties on Russia, including the demilitarization of the Black Sea and the loss of its strategic naval base at Sevastopol. The treaty also established the principle of the neutrality of the Black Sea, which would have far-reaching consequences for the balance of power in Europe. The Crimean War had a profound impact on the course of modern history. It marked the beginning of a new era of warfare, characterized by the use of advanced technologies such as railroads, telegraphs, and rifled artillery. The war also highlighted the importance of logistics and supply chain management, as the British and French armies struggled to maintain their lines of communication and supply in the face of harsh weather conditions and determined Russian resistance. The war also had significant consequences for the nations involved. Russia, humiliated by its defeat, began a process of modernization and reform, which would ultimately lead to the emancipation of the serfs and the transformation of the Russian Empire into a major industrial power. Britain and France, on the other hand, emerged from the war with enhanced reputations as military powers, but also with significant economic and human costs. One of the most lasting legacies of the Crimean War was the development of modern nursing. Florence Nightingale, a British nurse who had traveled to the Crimea to care for wounded soldiers, revolutionized the field of nursing with her emphasis on sanitation, hygiene, and compassionate care. Her work at the British hospital in Scutari, where she established a school of nursing and improved the living conditions of patients, set a new standard for nursing practice and paved the way for the establishment of modern hospitals. As we reflect on the Crimean War, we are reminded of the words of the historian A.J.P. Taylor, who once said, "The Crimean War was a war of mistakes, but it was also a war that changed the course of history." The war marked a significant turning point in the balance of power in Europe, as Russia, Britain, and France began to reevaluate their alliances and rivalries in the aftermath of the conflict. In conclusion, the Crimean War was a pivotal moment in modern history, marked by significant military, diplomatic, and social changes. As we look back on this epic struggle, we are reminded of the importance of understanding the complexities of war and its far-reaching consequences for individuals, nations, and the world at large. Join me next time on History with Herodotus, as we explore new topics and delve into the rich tapestry of human experience. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, remember that, to understand the present, we must first understand the past.